Hey, it's Christian. Gonna light a candle. Much better. So, things are going through my head like crazy, and I think that's what I'm trying to respond to, and what I'm trying to keep alive in this channel to just respond. And it's a challenge. I've always been more of a perfectionist type person. I've tried to uh, curate so much in my life. Sunday mornings, song executions, note for note, beat for beat. And I was listening to Paul Vanderklay's conversation with Martin Shaw. He talks about the wild, keeping things wild, and that's kind of been this. This has been wild for me. It's been very free. It's been trying to get into a flow state, and I wanted to make a comment about the Martin Shaw video. I was sitting there. I just recorded the podcast with Friday Morning Nameless, and I had shared this big story in my life that was incredibly meaningful, and it had been very private. And Martin Shaw says that this story is not mine anymore. God's asking me to release it, and I was just like, whoa, that's happening. And I was just watching Strange Theology go through. Something was happening on another channel about dreams or artificial intelligence and what are we aiming for, and he sees this on Twitter. It's like these, and then I'm listening to Grim Grizz, and he's talking about I mean, y'all all know these things, but a lot of this is new to me. Is like out there in the hive mind, and he, in this episodes that I watched today, he's got the fifth element, and it's just like flooding my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, when that movie came out, it was a weird movie, and there was all this interesting kind of sexuality in the film, but it was not really about that. It was about something vulnerable and breaking through the noise of, and it was going into this kind of ancient spiritual thing, but the whole world was so modern. But this hive mind thing, and I have really been contemplating, as I have this station up here that I made it just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna try to make this work, and now it kind of just sits, and I've got this view, and I feel like when I sit down and I put the headphones on and I get into this space, that I'm kind of plugged in to the matrix, and it's strange. One of the things that I've really wanted to talk about on this channel is Rankin Bass, and I feel like they are in this wavelength of weird and evoking in their imagery, and how their images just seem to sink to a deeper place on the subconscious. And you have their stop motion animation, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and that whole vibe that they did, and then you have Frosty the Snowman, and then you have the Hobbit cartoon, and a few more. I think they did Lord of the Rings as well, and then you have the Last Unicorn, and then you have Thundercats, and then they get bought by Disney, and their original company name was Videocraft. They're trying to explore the craft of video, and their imagery just when I've shown my kids The Hobbit, and when it always gets to the scene with Gollum, they're always like, "Oh, Dad, this is so creepy." And I think it gets into a place like that image of that character and his eyes, and they do this thing with a lot of their fantasy where they're all the characters' hands are like claws at the end, and it's just this, and they do a lot of things with wrinkles, um, and uh, you know, in the Thundercats, there's like these vultures creatures and these frog people, and they're kind of just grotesque. And then Mumra is this mummy and yeah, it's dealing with the occult, but it's dealing with the edges. And this is this Peugeot thing that's starting to just like and of course, and Jordan Peterson's a psychologist, and these things kind of go past the surface underneath, and so I wrote down kind of a stream of thought in it, and I made a comment on Strange Theology's channel just about how he was talking about how do you keep this spirit, and he was kind of analyzing the corner stuff, and how do you keep the spirit of genuineness, and it's a different kind of engagement. It's not, I think maybe it's not trying to be entertainment. It's trying to connect, but you go to the other social media and the spaces, it's all just, here's a very surface level of my life. Here's the best portion of it. And then that's it. Or the politics, or trying to be cool on Instagram, and Twitter's like politics. And there's this thing here that's trying to, I think it's trying to deal with some things on the subconscious level, but it's also facing the world. Like I listened to Grimm talk to Kale, a college professor, about the culture, and I've got a little tidbit of Grimm's thesis on the God set, the TV set, and can we push back into the spirit of set through his own devices, and conquer him, or fight him, or challenge him. The screen was one way for 30 years, and all of a sudden we have a way back into it. I'm just going to read this this was the stream of thought about Rankin Bass, about about 2 years of my childhood between the ages of 5 and 7, where I lived at my grandma's house in Nashville. And some of these things that came to mind, and some of this has to do with also my heritage, my mom's side of like Swiss European, English European history that I think was infused in a weird way into that house with my grandfather. And I haven't even read this since I wrote it like 2 nights ago, so it's really all over the place. But I'm just gonna read it and see what it says. See if this even will come out. Rankin and Bass used Videocraft magic to haunt the minds of children for decades. The enchanted world of Rankin and Bass inextricably tied to my grandmother's house. There was something unsaid in the world of my childhood, weaved between the Southern Baptist upbringing on my mother's side of the family a joy of enchanted fantasy handed down from my Swiss grandfather's heritage. My grandfather on my mother's side died when I was just 4 because both my parents were babies of their large families. I have a few memories of him, and one of them are him working in his wood shop in the basement of their suburban home on the west side of Nashville in the late 1980s. If you could imagine George Washington as a man born in the 1920s, you could imagine my grandfather, a tall, normal-sized man with thick gray hair and properly parted and Western European folk tales. A joy of history and storytelling, enigma in his quiet air. Enchantment surrounded me as a child. Rankin Bass, Hobbit, and Frosty the Snowman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Sierra point-and-click adventures of Black Cauldron and King's Quest, green shag carpet in the laundry room, the basement under the house, the stone wall that led to the creek next to the house with the giant bush to make a hobbit hole in, a woods in the back with the vines and the ditches and a playhouse built years before I was born using old sinks and carpet, and housed the monstrous gravely mower. A wall of old spoons collected from the old world. Smells of old sweetness filled the air. Hodgepodge rooms, a fireplace tended by the gruff uncle. Delicious date balls and hard candies at Christmas, and liquor on the edges of the celebrations. It was Pennywell Drive. In this place, I was given Black Cauldron, King's Quest, The Hobbit, and Star Wars. Cartoon Narnia, BBC Narnia, stories of Uncle Peter with the long nose hidden in his pocket, tales of family history stretching back past the first American president to the Swiss, Germans, and Old English, on slideshows on the projector for official family history lessons, my cousins dressed as pirates visiting me after going to the Cheatham County Fair, my aunt hosting pioneer days on her farm with the stone bridge and the culvert, in a barn with minnows in the bathtub, and a rope swing over the ditch in the field where the sun set and the fireflies dotted the air. We pretended we were puppies and got lost in imaginary play. Aunts and uncles who made movies dressed the characters, acted in plays, and rigged the explosives. Little Gnomes on Nickelodeon and the movie about peanut butter that haunts me to this day. Fairy tales on video from Family Home Entertainment, a velveteen rabbit that comes to life from the true love of a boy. When I lived at Pennywell, I lived in an enchanted world. These places, images, games, and histories would haunt my subconscious for the rest of my life. It made me different from the boys who picked fights at recess and had to catch on quick or get my butt whipped. Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers were my only connection because the rest were just fairy stories and tales of galaxies far, far away, which is how my new world felt away from Pennywell. And a boy couldn't love fairy stories, and the Jedi now were extinct. The Jedi fire had gone out of the galaxy, and I was the last of their old religion. And now stripped down religion and a brown farm in the middle of nowhere would be my world. Long gone the days of Green Pennywell. When we moved, my granny packed me a bag of videotapes. I don't know. I'm trying to figure this out. It's blowing my mind. Check out my video on Thomas Kincaid and Jonathan Peugeot to kind of see this stuff is starting to like I kind of wrote that in a little bit of a haze. I don't know. I'm trying to get this stuff out. I'm trying to figure out I'm trying to figure out my place and how I connect in this. And it's somewhere in here. And all right, we'll see you next time.